this out together.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Honourable Minister of Labour, I'm afraid that his speech would have been well informed if there had been some reference to broken promises to workers in the fossil fuel sector already. So when we talk about how workers don't like to hear this language, I was in Paris with his friend and predecessor, the Minister of Environment at the time, Catherine McKenna, was working with Canadian labor unions in working hard to get the language of exactly, quote unquote, just transition into the Paris Agreement. But at that point, she came back to Canada and put in place a task force on coal sector workers. They actually went into every coal sector worker community in Alberta and Saskatchewan, co-chaired by the head of the Conservation Council of New Brunswick and co-chaired by the then head of the Canadian Labour Congress, now a senator. And they went into every community and they listened to coal sector workers. And they came up with 10 key principles that should be followed. They are gathering dust, these principles, under the title of Just Transition for Coal Sector Workers. And now this morning, of course, this debate isn't about the bill itself. It's about everybody's right to speak to it. And here I am as leader of the Green Party of Canada. First chance to speak to the bill is on the question of shutting down debate before we even talk about the work that is important to do and using language, not phraseology, not minimizing it and ridiculing it, but it was hard work to get it in a legally binding agreement to which Canada agreed, signed, and ratified, uses the language just transition, because the emphasis there is not just on the transition, but the justice of it, which the workers who gave and the communities that gave their time in full faith that their report would go somewhere and not just gather dust on a shelf. I see you want me to hurry up, Mr. Speaker, but I've had it. I've had it with being hurried up and shut up and kept off the floor because this bill is important and now we're going to have time allocation. I don't know that I'll get to speak to it. All right, dear friend of mine, Minister of Labour, please don't use time allocation every single bill. It's insulting to democracy and it makes a mockery of the work to review important legislation in this place.
I'm just trying to keep people to the topic at hand and make sure that everybody gets to participate. The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I would say, look, time is of the essence here. The Inflation Reduction Act has passed in the United States. It is the single greatest, perhaps, industrial policy, and probably the single greatest piece of legislation that's been passed in any democracy in the world on the issue of energy transition. We got to move. And the way in which we move will determine whether or not how we move is sustainable and competitive in drawing investment. And we want to do it right. We want to do it with workers on side. If I, on the issue of time allocation, please tell me in here what is so bad about including workers in decisions. Just if you could tell me, if there are larger issues that are unresolved as they are in this House on issues of energy transition, but on the issue of whether or not workers should have a role here, let's get to work at it.
There's about 11 minutes left, or 10 minutes and 46 seconds, so just make sure we keep concise in our questions and comments. Questions and comments, the honourable member for... I know, it's sort of like flipping a coin at